Why was everyone laughing except her? The dining facility had gone silent, and yet laughter hung thick in the air, nervous and cruel. 40 Navy SEALs froze mid-bite, their eyes shifting toward the center tables where a single confrontation held the entire room hostage. Lieutenant Jade Monroe stood motionless, tray balanced in both hands, her gaze fixed not on the man speaking to her, but on the reflection of fluorescent light glinting off his polished boots. Commander Rick Dalton. Barrel-chested, gray-stubbled, 42, the kind of man who owned every space he entered. And right now, that space was the DFAC, a small world where power lived in tone and posture. "Paper rank earns paper respect," he said, voice smooth as steel. "Lieutenant, on your knees, prove you belong here." Forks stopped moving, breathing hitched. Someone whispered, "No way," but no one stepped in. The hum of the ceiling lights grew louder in the quiet. Dalton leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. The kind of smile men wear when they've decided humiliation is a lesson. Jade's tray didn't shake, not even a tremor. She set it down on the nearest table, precise, deliberate, every motion measured as if control itself were armor. Her index finger rested along the tray's edge, not gripping, just guiding. A tiny detail, invisible to most. But in the far corner, Senior Chief Nate Garrett noticed. Garrett was 53, face carved by salt and sun, eyes dulled only by years of loss. He knew control when he saw it, the kind that came from places not written on service records. He nudged the man beside him, murmured something that disappeared under a ripple of uneasy laughter. Jade knelt. No protest, no hesitation. She pulled a napkin from her pocket and began wiping dust from Dalton's right boot. The scrape of fabric against leather was louder than it should have been. The room cracked with laughter, half amusement, half discomfort. Dalton shifted his foot, forcing her to adjust. "That's more like it," he said, loud enough for everyone. "Maybe now you'll understand how things work around here. We don't need administrators, we need operators." Jade didn't answer. Her breathing changed, 4 seconds in through her nose, hold for 4, release for 4. A rhythm so disciplined it barely seemed human. Garrett caught it. That wasn't office breathing, that was SEER school breathing. Survival, evasion, resistance, escape. He taught it once long ago. He felt something twist in his gut. When she finished, Jade rose, folded the napkin neatly, and dropped it into the trash. Not a glance toward Dalton. Not a single spark of rebellion, at least none visible. She took her tray, crossed to the far corner, and sat alone. Her hands were steady, her eyes unreadable. The chatter resumed slowly, but it never felt the same. A few whispered jokes, a few pitying looks, and one man, Dalton, smirking like a conqueror. Garrett kept watching her. There was something in the way she moved, deliberate, quiet, as if she'd already mapped every exit. He waited until the crowd thinned before approaching. He didn't sit, only stood with his coffee cooling in his hand. "You prior service?" he asked softly. She looked up, eyes calm. "Administrative track, Senior Chief, 3 years." He frowned. "You know the range code protocol." "Condition 4, she answered instantly. "Chamber and magazine clear, bolt forward, safety on. Ranger master calls cold before anyone crosses the line." No hesitation, no thought, just memory. Garrett nodded slowly. "Good to know." He turned away, leaving her alone with the last traces of laughter still echoing through the hall. When Jade finally stepped outside, the evening air was warm, the base lights blinking to life one by one across the compound. She walked past the obstacle course, the firing range, the motor pool, eyes flicking across each in silent catalog. Every route, every guard post, every blind spot. Not wandering, memorizing. Inside her temporary quarters, she peeled back the strip of medical tape around her left wrist. Beneath it, a compression bandage. Beneath that, something dark inked into her skin. She pressed the tape back down. The mark stayed hidden. Sleep came easily, too easily for someone humiliated hours earlier. Because sleep wasn't comfort, it was calculation. At 5:30 she was already running. The perimeter track was still cloaked in darkness. SEALs running their own PT glanced her way, some curious, some mocking. She ignored them all. Her pace was even, her breathing a metronome. 4 in, 4 hold, 4 out. At the 6-mile mark she stopped at a water fountain. Captain Elias Ward stood there filling his bottle, lean frame outlined against the rising light. Intelligence officer, always watching. "At ease, Lieutenant," he said without looking at her. "You always run that early." "Yes, sir, habit." "Good habit." He capped his bottle. "Settling in okay. I heard there was an incident at dinner." "No incident, sir, just orientation." He studied her. "Right," he said, slow and cautious. "Well, if you need anything, Building 7, open door policy." When he left, Jade waited until he was out of sight before resuming her run. Ward was intel. Intel officers notice patterns. She'd have to be careful. By 700, she was back in her small office, surrounded by fluorescent hum and 2 indifferent junior officers who avoided eye contact. Her day was paperwork and requisitions. Exactly what everyone expected from a lieutenant with administrative on her record. At 1100 her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. The photo was instant recognition, her kneeling at Dalton's boots. The caption, "When admin tries to play soldier," already circulating in the base group chat. 200 people, laughter emojis, mockery. Jade stared at it for a moment, expression blank, then muted the thread. The man across from her snickered behind his screen. She looked at him once, long enough that he turned away. Lunch was worse. Every table filled mysteriously as she approached, soldiers shifting to close gaps. She ate standing, tray balanced near the trash cans. When Dalton walked by, he didn't even glance at her. His team did. Their smirks said enough. By afternoon, she was assigned to inventory the equipment storage facility. A chore. 2 days of mindless counting. She finished in 4 hours. Her numbers perfect. Her system cleaner than the sergeant had ever seen. "You've done this before," he said, impressed. "Standard procedure, Sergeant, just following the checklist." "Yeah, but most officers can't tell a carabiner from a quick link." "I read the manual." A lie. She knew every piece of gear like muscle memory. The weight, the balance, the metallic click that told her if it would hold a man's life or break it. At 1600 she was called to the obstacle course. Dalton waited there with his team, arms crossed, voice bright with false civility. "Lieutenant Monroe," he called. "Perfect timing. We need an officer sign-off for the rope climb. Regulation, right?" It wasn't regulation, and both of them knew it. Refusing, though, would hand him ammunition. She walked toward the 40-foot tower, eyes scanning, mind dissecting. The anchor points bore fresh scratches. The main rope twisted unnaturally a third of the way up, a weak point. Crash pads offset just enough to fail. Not negligence. Sabotage. She tugged at the rope, pretending to test it. "Rope's fine, sir, but the anchor needs an engineering inspection before use. Regulation 372. Dalton's smirk faltered. "I'm the training officer, Lieutenant. I don't need a paper pusher quoting manuals." "Not telling, sir. Just citing. If something happens and there's no engineering signature, the investigation traces back to whoever authorized the climb." A quiet threat wrapped in regulation, the kind that could ruin careers. Dalton's jaw tightened. "Fine, waste of time, but whatever makes you feel important." That evening, engineering did inspect the tower. They found faults, serious ones. Word spread fast. Some praised Jade for thoroughness. Others called her paranoid. Dalton's narrative that she was a bureaucrat meddling in operator business stuck. In her room, she scrolled through messages, memes, jokes. Her face edited onto a mop captioned "Safety Sally." She read them all, then closed her phone, adjusted the bandage on her wrist, and lay back. Tomorrow would be worse. She was counting on it. The next morning, formation. Rows of uniforms under the early sun. The base commander spoke first, training updates, inspection schedules. Then Dalton stepped forward. "One more thing," he said, voice carrying over the crowd. "Engineering cleared the obstacle course tower. No issues. So for anyone who got the wrong impression yesterday, trust your training officers. We know what we're doing." A lie dressed as reassurance. She stood silent under 100 stares. Garrett watched from the second row, fists tight at his sides. After formation, he found her. "You did the right thing," he murmured. "Those bolts were loose, could have killed someone." "I know, Senior Chief." "Then why aren't you speaking up? Dalton's making you look incompetent." "Maybe I am, Senior Chief. Maybe I'm just a paper pusher who got lucky." He studied her. "No," he said quietly. "You're something else, I just can't see it yet." She smiled faintly, almost regretfully. "Maybe you're not supposed to." By 1300, she was sitting across from Dalton again. His office smelled of old coffee and polished ego. He slid a document across the desk. "Request for transfer, 30 days pending approval, or you can resign now." She skimmed it, professional language, polite execution. A bureaucratic knife slid neatly between the ribs. "When does this go through?" 30 days. "I'll stay, sir." "Suit yourself." She left without another word, walked straight to Building 7. Captain Ward's office was empty. "Off base," the clerk said. "Classified briefing." Fine, she had time. She walked the base again under the pretense of duty checks, motor pool, firing range, supply depot, mapping patterns, counting cameras, watching who watched her. Every step part of a larger pattern no one else could see. That afternoon she was assigned to observe a live-fire exercise. Routine, boring, until Dalton called out. "Lieutenant, why don't you join us? Get a feel for what real work looks like." She took the rifle offered to her. M4 carbine, standard issue. She performed a brass check, loaded, chambered, safety on, smooth, too smooth. The kind of muscle memory that doesn't come from manuals. "Range is hot," the rangemaster called. Jade lifted the weapon, 4 seconds in. Hold, out, target at 50 meters, one squeeze, center mass, again, 5 rounds, tight grouping. Dalton's smile was gone. "Not bad for someone who's never deployed." "Basic marksmanship is part of officer training, sir." "True," he said, "but usually there's hesitation. You handled that weapon like you've done it before." "I follow instructions." He said nothing more, but she could feel his attention settle like a weight between her shoulder blades. By evening she was under formal complaint: failure to follow chain of command, unauthorized coordination with engineering. A paper bullet fired straight at her record. She saved a copy, encrypted it, and deleted the notification. Dinner again, alone, outdoors this time, far from the noise. The sky painted in gold and purple. Garrett joined her halfway through his sandwich. "Mind if I sit?" "Free country, Senior Chief." They ate in silence until he spoke again. "You ever hear of a 4-man extraction gone wrong, classified location, couple years back?" Her fork paused midair. "My old buddy was there. Said someone on the team kept it from turning into a bloodbath. Ran numbers, adjusted the plan on the fly, saved everyone. Command never said who." She met his eyes. "Nice story." He shrugged. "Funny thing, that operator used 4-count breathing just like you." Maybe it was the sunset light, but for a moment her composure flickered. "Maybe I'm a fast learner," she said. Garrett stood, tossed his wrapper into the trash. "Or maybe you're exactly where you're supposed to be, and maybe Commander Dalton should be more careful about who he decides to mess with." He walked away. Jade sat there long after the sun disappeared, listening to the hum of generators and distant voices. Somewhere deep inside the compound, a storm was forming. She could feel it. Every lie, every humiliation, every whisper was data, evidence. And soon, the truth she carried beneath that bandage would find daylight. But not yet. Tonight, silence was still her weapon. Why was her door unlocked? Jade stopped with her hand still on the handle, heartbeat slowing to a calculated rhythm. She never left it that way. The fluorescent light from the hallway spilled across her quarters, small, utilitarian, sterile, but something in the air was off. A scent of metal displaced stillness. She stepped inside silently, eyes flicking to the corners, the desk, the bed. Nothing looked disturbed, yet everything felt wrong. Her notebooks were half an inch out of line. Her laptop lid was down when she always left it slightly open. Someone had been here. She closed the door behind her, locked it twice, then slid down to sit on the edge of her bed. They were searching now, not curious, nervous. That meant Dalton was getting desperate. She reached into the small pocket inside her jacket, confirmed the microSD card was still there. Untouched. That card contained every anomaly she'd logged since arriving, photos of the rope anchor, maintenance records, timestamps, even snippets of overheard conversations. It was her insurance policy and her trap. Her phone buzzed. A new group chat meme. Her face photoshopped onto a paper airplane, captioned "Tactical Genius." 83 people laughing. She stared at it, took a screenshot, filed it into her evidence folder, and muted the thread again. Outside, night closed over the base. Helicopter rotors churned distant air, searchlights sweeping lazily across the compound. Inside, Jade switched off the lamp, lying back fully clothed, watching shadows crawl along the ceiling. 4 seconds in. 4 hold, 4 out. Control. Always control. By dawn, she was already running again. Routine wasn't comfort, it was cover. The rhythm of motion made her invisible. The rest of the base barely noticed her anymore. Anonymity was its own armor. At 600, she reported to the fitness field for the mandatory PT test. Dalton was waiting, clipboard in hand, voice bright with professional courtesy. "Morning, Lieutenant. Ready to show us what you've got?" "Yes, sir." Push-ups first. Her back straight, each motion exact. 50, 60. Not too many, not too few, just enough to be average. Sit-ups the same. Controlled competence, nothing more. She learned long ago that exceptional drew attention, and attention was lethal when you were undercover. Then the run. 3 miles of even terrain and heavy silence. Dalton timed every second, eyes narrow. She finished mid-pack, sweat running down her temples, heart steady. "Adequate," he said flatly. "You'll receive your official score within 48 hours." She turned to leave. "I notice you've got a bandage on your wrist," he added, casual. "Minor strain, sir." "Good, because if you're injured, we'd need documentation, clearance, restrictions. Wouldn't want you overstepping your limits." A test within a test. Admit weakness and he'd isolate her. Deny it and he'd accuse her of lying later. "I'm cleared for full duty, sir. Precautionary wrap." "If you say so." She walked away without reaction, but inside, a warning light blinked. The bandage was no longer invisible. It was a target. By mid-morning, the summons came. Security office. Lieutenant Commander Hayes waiting with Dalton at his shoulder. "Lieutenant Monroe," Hayes began, polite but cold. "We've received a report of unauthorized access to classified training files using your credentials." Jade kept her breathing even. "I haven't accessed any classified material, sir." Hayes turned a monitor toward her. "Your login was used at 19:47 hours yesterday in Building 3, Terminal 7. "That's impossible. I was in my quarters." "Can anyone verify that?" "No, sir, I was alone." Dalton's arms folded, silent satisfaction in his eyes. Hayes typed, frowned. "Strange. Access came from your card. If someone used your credentials, that's still a security violation. You're responsible for safeguarding them." She saw the play instantly. He'd used her login himself or had someone do it. Classic framing. Enough to stain a record, not enough to prove malicious intent. "I understand, sir," she said calmly. "I'll change my credentials and file the incident report." Hayes blinked at her composure. That's appropriate. Be more careful. Violations like this end careers. Dalton smirked behind him. Told you she was careless. Jade left the office, walked straight to it, changed her passwords, filed the report, logged everything. Every encounter documented, timestamped, archived in triplicate, one local, one encrypted, one off-site. By afternoon, the rumor had evolved. Now she wasn't just careless, she was being investigated for espionage. Whispers followed her through corridors. Faces turned away. The power of gossip, no evidence needed, just repetition. At 1500 hours, her inbox pinged. Administrative Review Board notice. 3 days. Her fitness for continued service under evaluation. If she failed, immediate transfer. She read it twice. 3 days, that was all she needed. Dalton thought he'd won. The trap was closing itself. The rest of the day she played her role perfectly. Quiet, diligent, forgettable. She processed requisitions, checked supply lists, smiled politely at people who mocked her hours earlier. It was the calm before an engineered storm. At 1700, she was at the motor pool checking vehicle logs when Dalton appeared in the doorway, sunlight outlining him in gold. "Lieutenant," he said easily, "got a minute off the record?" She set down her clipboard. "Yes, sir." He stepped closer, the scent of aftershave mixing with diesel. "The board's a formality. You and I both know how it ends, but it doesn't have to be ugly. Request the transfer yourself and I'll make sure it's clean. Leave with dignity." She studied him, unblinking. "Why help me, sir?" "Because you're not a bad officer, just misplaced. This place eats people who don't fit. I'm giving you an exit." Almost convincing, almost. "I appreciate it, sir, but I'll finish my assignment." "Even if it ends your career?" "Even then." He exhaled slowly, disappointment feigned. "Your choice, but answer me something. What are you really doing here? You don't belong at a SEAL facility. Someone with your file doesn't land here by accident." "Maybe you should ask whoever assigned me, sir." His jaw worked. "Maybe I will." He left. The moment the door closed, Jade's hand was already on her phone. 3 words typed, encrypted, sent. Phase 2 initiated. The reply came almost instantly. "Proceed with caution." She deleted both. The chessboard was aligning. Hours later, twilight drenched the base in copper light. She finished her inspection and noticed Dalton's vehicle parked half-hidden behind the maintenance bay, out of pattern, angled away from cameras. She memorized the position. Nothing about him was accidental. Morning arrived under a ceiling of gray clouds, the kind that promised rain and delivered none. A printed notice waited under her door. Mandatory equipment inspection 800, motor pool. Administrative staff present. She dressed carefully, neutral expression fixed, and arrived on time. Only Dalton and 3 of his men were there. No other admin officers, a trap disguised as procedure. "Lieutenant Monroe," Dalton began, packing in slow circles, "we've had reports of missing gear, tools, maintenance supplies. Small stuff, but it adds up. We're checking vehicles. Open yours." "I don't have an assigned vehicle, sir." "You signed out number 47, correct?" She hadn't in 3 days. The logs were altered. "Yes, sir." He led the way to the vehicle, produced keys, unlocked the door, reached inside the console and almost theatrically withdrew a small toolkit. "Restricted equipment," he said, holding it up. "Belongs to the Special Operations Maintenance Facility. Care to explain?" "I can't, sir. I've never seen it before." "Of course, equipment just materializes on its own." His smile was cold. "This is theft of government property. I'm placing you on administrative hold pending investigation. Surrender your ID." There it was, the overreach. The moment arrogance eclipsed prudence. She removed her card, handed it over calmly. "Understood, sir. Petty Officer Chen will escort you to quarters. You're restricted until further notice." Chen, young and uncertain, gestured toward the door. Jade walked ahead of him, back straight, pace steady. They passed knots of personnel who stopped to watch, whispers already forming in their wake. Lieutenant Monroe caught stealing. By evening it would be legend. Inside her room, Chen searched perfunctorily, found nothing, and left. The lock clicked behind him. Silence again. She waited 30 seconds, enough time for footsteps to fade, then moved. The bookshelf concealed what the inspection had missed, an old naval manual hollowed out. Inside, a slim black phone and a portable drive. She powered the device, accessed the encrypted partition. Video feeds appeared, grainy, time-stamped. Tiny cameras she'd installed over the past week while updating equipment inventories. The motor pool, the training office, the security terminal. And there it was, time-stamped 2200 hours the previous night. Dalton entering vehicle 47, setting the toolkit into the console, leaving. Evidence. She leaned back, eyes closing for a moment, letting the quiet hum of victory settle. But she didn't send the footage yet, not until the net was airtight. 6 hours until Ward returned from his briefing. 6 hours for Dalton to relax, to believe he'd buried her. 6 hours for arrogance to rot into evidence. Outside, the base functioned like nothing had happened. Inside, she watched from behind the curtain, unseen. At noon, the door opened without a knock. Dalton again, alone this time. "Lieutenant," he said smoothly, sitting in her chair, "we should talk privately." "About what, sir?" "Your options. Theft charges can end a career. But if you resign today, cite personal reasons, everything disappears. The toolkit, the paperwork, all gone. You walk away clean. And if I do, then you'll spend years fighting charges you can't beat." His voice softened, almost gentle. "Why fight? No one wins against the system." She met his eyes. "Maybe I just don't like bullies, sir." The smile thinned. "Careful, you're already on thin ice." He stood, left, the door closing with mechanical precision. 4 hours until Ward's return. 4 hours to maintain the illusion. But at 1400 hours, footsteps returned, Chen again, eyes uneasy. "Ma'am, the commander wants you in the motor pool, now." "I'm under restriction." Orders changed. Every instinct screamed trap, but she nodded. "Lead the way." The air outside felt heavier, charged. The motor pool was quieter than it should have been, no engines running, no chatter. Dalton waited with 8 men arrayed behind him, all in duty uniforms. "Lieutenant Monroe," he said loudly, "we've reviewed the evidence and it doesn't add up. Multiple entries with your card, your fingerprints on the toolkit. So here's your last chance, come clean. Tell us what you're really doing here." "Theatrics, a stage with witnesses." "I have nothing to confess, sir." "Then explain this." He lifted a tablet, security footage showing someone entering vehicle 47. The movement's jerky, lighting wrong, fake. "That's not me, sir." "Who else would it be?" "Someone who needed it to be me." A murmur rippled through the men. Even they heard the implication. Dalton's face flushed. "You're accusing me of falsifying evidence." "I'm saying that video isn't from 2200 hours. The lighting's daylight, motor pool lights would have been on after sunset. The timestamp's wrong." For a beat, silence, eyes darted between them. Dalton's authority hung in the balance, cracking under the weight of logic. He stepped forward, fury cutting through his voice. "I've had enough of your games. You think you're clever, quoting regs, twisting details, but you're a liability. You're done here." He closed the distance until his breath brushed her face. "You're going to resign, right now, or I'll destroy what's left of your career." She didn't move, didn't blink, only breath, 4 in, hold, out. His eyes narrowed. "Who taught you that breathing technique?" "What technique, sir?" "The 4 count, that's seer breathing. Where'd you learn it?" It was the question she'd been waiting for. "The same place you did, sir." A subtle shift, like the moment before an explosion. The men behind him glanced at each other, sensing the change but not its meaning. Dalton froze, confusion warring with recognition. "What did you just say?" "You asked where I learned four-count breathing. I said the same place you did. Survival, evasion, resistance, escape. Standard curriculum for anyone who operates in denied territory." His hand shot out, grabbing her left wrist. "Then let's see what else you're hiding." He yanked the bandage free, tape tore skin. The cloth fell away. Silence. A black serpent coiled around a silver blade, inked from wrist to forearm, scales glinting faintly in the hangar light. Below it, letters sharp and unmistakable, SD9. 8 men stared, uncertain what they were seeing. Garrett, arriving late for scheduled inspection, stopped cold in the doorway. His voice barely rose above a whisper. "Serpent directive." Dalton's grip loosened instantly. The blood drained from his face. Those units don't exist," he stammered. "You're right, Commander," Jade said softly. "They don't, not officially." He stepped back as though the ink on her arm burned. The serpent's black coils shimmered under the fluorescent lights, the blade's silver edge catching the hum of the motor pool's lamps. Around them, time seemed to hold its breath. 8 men, elite operators trained to face anything, stood frozen in the stillness, staring not at their commander but at the tattoo. Every one of them recognized military ink when they saw it, but none recognized this. Except Garrett. He stepped forward, voice rasping from a throat gone dry. "Serpent directive," he whispered again. The words carried like gunfire through the quiet. Dalton's face twisted. "That's not real. Those units were myths, ghost stories." Jade's voice was calm, steady as the rhythm she breathed by. "You're right, sir. They don't exist. Not in any registry, not in any database. Not anymore." She rolled her sleeve higher, revealing the rest of the serpent. The details were impossibly intricate, each scale, each curve inked with surgical precision. Unit SD9. Operational years 2017 through 2020. Primary mission: high-value target elimination in denied territory. Secondary mission: internal security for joint operations. We didn't answer to JSOC. We answered to people whose names you'll never know. Dalton shook his head violently. "That's nonsense. Classified fantasy. There's no record." "There isn't supposed to be." She reached into her jacket pocket, withdrew a slim, matte black phone, the one she'd kept hidden. With a few quick swipes, she unlocked an encrypted folder and held it out. The image on the screen silenced whatever came next. A younger version of her stared out, helmeted, half-masked, rifle slung low, dust swirling around her boots. The serpent tattoo visible, unmistakable. Behind her, desert mountains glowed under a sinking sun. Garrett's eyes widened. "Kandahar, Extraction 19. Jade nodded. 3 squads pinned down, Garrett said quietly. 1 wounded, drone feed compromised. Exfil delayed 18 hours. Command said someone coordinated the rescue from inside the perimeter. Nobody ever said who. We figured it was ghosts." "No ghosts," Jade said, "just orders." Dalton's mouth opened, closed. The color had drained from his face. Even if any of it's true, what the hell are you doing here? Serpent Directive disbanded years ago. Why send you to a training facility? To me. "Because," she said softly, "someone needed to investigate." He frowned. "Investigate what?" "Patterns." She took a slow step closer, lowering the phone but never breaking eye contact. 3 years, 3 dead, all under your oversight. Rope failure, drowning, vehicle rollover. 3 investigations, each closed within 72 hours. Each listing operator error. "That's enough." His voice cracked, sharp, defensive. "No, sir," she said, "it's not." Her voice was calm but cutting, every word precise. "When I examined the reports, I found mismatched serial numbers on safety gear inspection logs signed by personnel who weren't even on base, witness statements altered in digital archives. Those aren't accidents. They're edits. Someone was protecting themselves. You're accusing me. I'm stating facts. Dalton's hand trembled just enough for Garrett to see. The younger SEALs shifted uneasily, caught between loyalty and logic. Garrett's voice was low, gravel-edged. The rope tower, the anchor points. You weren't being paranoid, you were documenting. Jade nodded. Every photo, every measurement, every report was transmitted to an oversight committee. Each inconsistency logged. Each falsified signature traced. A long silence stretched. Then Rodriguez, the youngest of Dalton's men, spoke up. "Sir, if what she's saying is true, if those reports were faked." "They were," Dalton barked. "She's lying, spinning stories to save her career. You think I'd risk my command over a few safety reports?" "Then explain the toolkit," Jade said evenly. "The one you planted in Vehicle 47 at 2200 last night." Dalton froze. "I have unedited footage," she continued quietly. 3 angles, correct lighting, correct timestamps, you entering the vehicle, you placing the kit, you leaving." The men looked at him, first confusion, then disbelief, then something colder. Dalton tried to speak, but the words failed him. His authority, the armor he'd worn like a second skin, began to fracture in real time. Jade turned toward the others. "You all deserve to know what's been happening here. This investigation began months ago, long before I stepped foot on base, when repeated incidents occurred under identical circumstances, when families started asking why their loved ones were dying during training while safety reports stayed spotless. Someone in Washington noticed. They decided to send someone in, someone who could blend in, observe, and survive the culture of silence that allowed this." She looked back at Dalton. "That's why I'm here." For a moment, all that moved was the low whir of the ceiling fan and the buzz of fluorescent lights. Garrett spoke softly, like a man piecing together truth he'd long suspected. "So that first night, cleaning his boots, that wasn't humiliation. That was evidence." "Yes, of a toxic command climate where abuse hides behind hierarchy." Rodriguez's voice cracked. "Private Torres, the guy who died last year on the rope climb, that was my bunkmate in basic. We were told he ignored procedure. You're saying he did." The rope had been flagged for replacement 2 weeks earlier. Someone removed the red tag from the system. He trusted the line. It failed him. Rodriguez sank onto a crate, face pale, hands trembling. "We blamed him." Jade's eyes softened for the first time. "You shouldn't have had to." Dalton's jaw clenched. "You think you can waltz in here and tear down everything I've built because of a few discrepancies? I've run this facility for 7 years. My record's spotless." "Spotless because you erased the stains," she said quietly. He took a step forward, eyes blazing, voice low enough that only she could hear. "You have no idea how this place works. You can't train warriors by drowning them in paperwork. Accidents happen. We push limits. That's how they survive combat." Jade's gaze didn't waver. "Pushing limits is training. Ignoring safety is negligence. There's a difference. You sit behind a desk and call it integrity. You hide behind authority and call it leadership." For a heartbeat, the air between them turned electric, past words, past rank, a raw collision of belief systems. Then Dalton's composure snapped. "You have no authority here," he shouted. "I have exactly the authority granted by the Inspector General's office," she replied calmly, pulling up another document on her phone. "Countersigned by the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Special Operations. You've been under investigation for 6 weeks, Commander. You just didn't know it." He stared at the screen she held out. A classified memorandum, seals real, signatures authentic. His lips parted, but nothing came. "You're lying," he whispered. "I wish I were." Her voice softened, nearly a whisper now. 3 families buried their children while you signed off on reports that blamed them. I came here to find out why." Garrett turned toward her, voice hoarse. "What happens now?" "Now," she said, "we finish it." She tapped her comms app, sending an encrypted burst to a secure line. Within minutes, footsteps echoed down the corridor. Ward arrived, flanked by base MPs, and a woman in civilian attire carrying a briefcase marked with Department of Defense insignia. Dalton's face drained of all remaining color. "You brought the IG here." "She was already coming," Jade said. "Your message about missing equipment was the trigger event. You called your own audit." Inspector General Hartley stepped forward, tone clipped and professional. "Commander Rick Dalton, effective immediately, you are relieved of duty pending formal investigation into training irregularities and falsified documentation. Please surrender your sidearm and access credentials." He didn't move. Garrett stepped forward. "Sir, don't make this worse." Dalton looked at him, then at Jade, the serpent still gleaming faintly against her skin. For a moment, he seemed smaller, like the man who'd built himself from authority had finally met something he couldn't command. He unbuckled his sidearm slowly, placed it on the table. "You think you've won, Lieutenant," he said, voice low, trembling with rage. "You have no idea what you've just done." Jade met his gaze without blinking. "You're right, I didn't win. The families did." Hartley nodded to the MPs. Dalton was escorted out, silent now, eyes fixed on some invisible horizon where power still lived in memory. The room exhaled. When the door closed, Garrett turned to Jade. "You could have told me." "I couldn't," she said. "Part of the protocol. No one at facility level could know. The test was how command responded when truth was inconvenient." He gave a dry laugh, shaking his head. "Well, they failed." "Most do," she said softly. Ward stepped closer. "Serpent directive," he said, cautious curiosity in his tone. "I've heard rumors, black budget off book. They say those operatives did things that never make reports." "Some rumors are true," Jade said. "Most are noise." He studied her, eyes narrowed not in suspicion but in something like respect. "What happens to him now?" "Depends on the audit. If he falsified reports that led to deaths, it's manslaughter. If it was negligence, administrative punishment. Either way, his command is over." Ward nodded slowly. "And you?" She looked toward the open hangar doors, where the sky was beginning to bruise into twilight. "Wherever the next investigation takes me, Serpent Directive may be classified out of existence, but the mission still exists, just under different names." Garrett frowned. "Sounds lonely." "It is," she admitted, "but necessary." As night deepened, the motor pool filled with quiet motion. Technicians documenting evidence, MPs sealing logs, investigators cataloging every cable and bolt. The work of truth was slow and methodical, like cleaning rust from metal. At 1700, Dalton was escorted off base, flanked by guards, wrists bound loosely. He didn't look back. The same men who once laughed at Jade now watched in stunned silence. Rodriguez approached her, eyes red-rimmed. "Ma'am, private tours, was it quick?" She paused. "The fall was 60 feet. Medical examiner said the injuries were catastrophic. He was unconscious instantly. He didn't suffer." Rodriguez nodded, voice breaking. "They told his parents it was his fault." "They'll get the truth," Jade said quietly. "They'll know their son followed every protocol, that he died doing his duty." He swallowed hard. "Thank you." When he left, Jade stood alone again in the echoing space. The serpent on her arm caught the last light of day, its scales turning gold. Garrett appeared beside her, holding 2 cups of black coffee. "Figured you might need this." She accepted it with a faint smile. "Thank you, Senior Chief." They stood side by side as the base lights flickered on. "That first night," he said, "the way you let him humiliate you, that was part of the setup, wasn't it?" "It was documentation," she said simply. A living example of how power distorts when no one questions it. He nodded slowly. Word going to spread. Every other training facility will start watching themselves. Triple checks, redundant inspections. Fear's a good motivator. That's the idea. It'll also make your next job harder. I'll adapt, she said. That's what operators do. They stood in silence for a while longer, watching the sky fade. Somewhere across the compound, a bugle sounded. The day was ending, but her work was. Later that night in her quarters, she peeled away the last of the medical tape. The skin beneath was raw, but the tattoo gleamed whole again. She traced the serpent's outline with her thumb, remembering every name, every shadowed mission, every cost. Her phone buzzed once, an encrypted message. Directive SD-10 active. Brief at 800. Location classified. Tower sends regards. She stared at the words, expression unreadable. Then she deleted the message, powered down the phone, and let the quiet settle around her. Serpent Directive never really ended. It simply learned to breathe where no one was looking. And sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. Why did the silence feel heavier after justice? Morning broke pale and reluctant over the base, washing the compound in thin gray light. The world hadn't changed much overnight. Vehicles still rumbled to life. Boots still pounded gravel on the running track, and somewhere a radio played a country song about home. But the air carried something different now. It was quieter, wary, like the whole installation had finally realized someone was listening. Lieutenant Jade Monroe stood at her window, coffee cooling in her hand, watching the early formations assemble without Dalton's shadow presiding over them. She'd expected relief, maybe even satisfaction, but what she felt was weight, an ache in her chest that victory never seemed to erase. Every time an investigation ended, the silence afterward was the same. No cheering, no closure, only the dull hum of systems resetting. Outside, Captain Ward was already at work, clipboard tucked beneath his arm, speaking with Inspector General Hartley beside the reviewing stand. The IG's posture was brisk, professional. She radiated the calm of people who deal only in facts. Jade envied her that simplicity. A knock came at her door, 3 soft raps hesitant. "Come in." Petty Officer Chen entered, posture stiff, expression unsure. Yesterday he'd escorted her under restriction, eyes full of judgment. Today he looked 20 years older. "Ma'am," he began, then faltered. "I wanted to say I'm sorry for how I looked at you, for not." "You followed orders," she said gently. "That's what you're trained to do." He shook his head. "I should have asked questions." "If you had, you might have compromised the investigation," she replied. "Sometimes the only way to expose a broken system is to let it break completely first." He nodded, eyes wet, then straightened. "If you ever need a driver again, ma'am, I volunteer." She gave a small, real smile. Noted. When he left, the quiet folded back around her. She finished her coffee, squared her shoulders, and stepped outside into the wind. The compound buzzed with controlled chaos. Teams cataloged every weapon and harness. Engineers disassembled tower anchors. Investigators carried sealed boxes marked evidence. The sound was strangely comforting, order returning one checklist at a time. Garrett found her near the motor pool, clipboard in hand. "Morning, Lieutenant." "Morning, Senior Chief." He studied her face. "You sleep at all?" "Enough to remember my name." He huffed a quiet laugh. "That's more than Dalton's getting. Word is, he's in a holding room down at Norfolk awaiting transfer. Lawyers already circling." Jade nodded. "They'll cut a deal, they always do." "Maybe, but every co in the chain's reading about it right now. You scared the hell out of a lot of people who thought their shortcuts were invisible." "That was the point." Garrett leaned against a Jeep fender, crossing his arms. "You know, when I saw you clean that man's boots, I thought you were broken. Turns out you were baiting the hook." I was documenting behavior, she said. Bullying is easy to hide until it's public. He chuckled softly. You and that serpent tattoo, whole damn myth walking in admin khakis. Guess I'll think twice before I underestimate quiet officers again. Good. She turned toward the range, where crews were tearing down targets for inspection. Because quiet doesn't mean weak, Senior Chief. It just means we know when to speak. He followed her gaze. You think they'll learn anything from this? They'll tighten their checklist, sure, but real change takes something else. Accountability that sticks. He nodded slowly. You ever get tired of fighting ghosts? She thought about that. Every day, but someone has to. The morning stretched into audits and debriefs. Ward gathered the remaining officers in the briefing hall, his tone measured but firm. From this point forward, he said, safety reports will be verified through dual-chain review. No sign-offs without witness confirmation. No exceptions. No one argued. When he finished, he gestured for Jade to step forward. The hum of whispered speculation died instantly. She faced them. Men who had laughed at her, ignored her, doubted her. For a heartbeat, the memory of that first night flashed behind her eyes. The tray in her hands, the echo of laughter, the scuff of a boot under her napkin. I'm not here to lecture you, she said quietly. You already know what went wrong. I'm here to remind you that discipline isn't just about obedience. It's about integrity when no one's watching. The strongest operators I've ever known weren't the loudest. They were the ones who owned their mistakes before someone else paid for them. No applause followed, only silence, the good kind, thoughtful, heavy. After the meeting, Ward caught up to her outside. You handled that perfectly. Truth doesn't need volume, she said. Still, he added, you gave them something they'll remember. They walked together toward the flight line. Helicopters waited like metallic birds, rotors glinting in sunlight. You know, Ward said, there's talk upstairs about expanding covert audit programs like yours. They're realizing command culture doesn't fix itself from the top down. She gave a faint smile. Accountability from the shadows. Exactly the hard kind. He paused, then asked, when do you leave? Tomorrow. That soon. Orders came through last night. New assignment, different coast. Ward stopped walking. Does it ever end, Lieutenant? Her eyes softened. Not for people like me. They reached the edge of the tarmac where an inspection crew was checking tie-downs. The wind whipped her hair loose from its clip, and for a moment she looked more human than legend. Take care of them, she said quietly. They're good men. They just needed a reason to remember who they were. I will, he promised. That night the base mess hall was quieter than she'd ever heard it. No laughter, no whispers. When she entered, conversations halted, not out of hostility now, but respect wrapped in guilt. She filled a tray, took a seat at the same corner table where she'd once eaten alone. A few minutes later, Garrett slid in opposite her. They're scared of you, he said, half smiling. They're scared of themselves, she corrected. He nodded. You leaving soon? Tomorrow at dawn. Next operation. She hesitated, then said, different facility, same problem. He leaned back, studying her. You ever wish you stayed invisible, lived an easy life somewhere quiet? Every time I close my eyes, she admitted. But then I remember the families who never got answers. I remember what silence costs. He raised his cup. To the loud truth, then. She tapped hers lightly against it. To the quiet kind, the kind that lasts. Later, when the hall emptied, she walked the perimeter one last time. The compound looked different in the dark, softer, almost forgiving. Floodlights shimmered on rain puddles that never quite evaporated, and the air carried the scent of oil and salt. She paused near the obstacle tower. Engineers had retorqued every bolt, replaced every rope, re-leveled every pad. The structure gleamed under the lights, stronger now. She placed her palm against the cold metal. You're safe now, she murmured. Footsteps approached. Garrett again. He stopped beside her without a word. They stood there, two silhouettes in the sodium glow. "You ever tell anyone what SD9 really stood for?" he asked. "No. Can I guess?" "You can try." He thought a moment, strength through discipline. Close, her smile was small, almost fond. Survival through duty. He exhaled, that fits. When he walked away, she stayed, watching the tower's shadows stretch across the ground until dawn's first light cut it apart. At sunrise she was already packed. One duffel, one black case, one folded uniform. She moved through the halls quietly, offering nods, brief goodbyes. Some saluted. Others just watched her go. Outside the hangar, Ward waited beside a gray transport plane. "You sure you don't want a formal send-off?" he asked. "I've had enough attention for one lifetime," she said. He extended a hand. "For what it's worth, Lieutenant, you reminded me why I joined." She took his hand firmly, then it was worth it. The ramp lowered with a hydraulic hiss. She climbed halfway, then looked back. The sun was just cresting the horizon, painting the compound in gold. Men were running drills again, shouting cadence. Life had resumed, but cleaner now, lighter. She gave a small nod, turned, and disappeared into the belly of the plane. Inside, the air smelled of metal and fuel. A single envelope waited on the jump seat beside her gear. No markings, no sender. She opened it. A slip of paper, printed in plain text. Briefing 800 hours. Location, undisclosed, directive SD-10. Maintain cover until confirmation. Tower sends regards. Beneath it, a single line handwritten in ink. "You're not done yet." She folded the paper, slid it into her pocket, and closed her eyes. The engines roared to life, vibrations thrumming through the fuselage. As the plane lifted, the base shrank beneath her, a grid of order and memory. She thought of Tor's haze price, of Garrett's quiet loyalty, of Dalton's rage turning finally into silence. She didn't feel triumph, just purpose, the kind that leaves scars. High above the coastline, the sun split through the clouds, turning the ocean silver. She watched it through the small window, breathing steady. 4 in, 4 hold, 4 out. Somewhere ahead, another facility waited. Another command convinced it was untouchable. Another story that would end the same way, with truth dragging itself out of the shadows, quiet but unstoppable. Because that was the real work of people like her. Not to fight wars, but to keep the places that trained warriors honest. And as the horizon widened, she felt that familiar mixture of exhaustion and resolve, the ache of someone who'd seen too much and still chose to stay in the fight. Some victories left banners, hers left silence. But in that silence, people lived. And sometimes that was enough. Why did silence always follow her? The transport plane descended through a thick sheet of gray cloud, the kind that blurred sea and sky into the same colorless expanse. Jade watched the coastline appear beneath her, jagged cliffs, pine forests, and a long stretch of wind-bitten tarmac carved into the hills. Her next posting waited somewhere down there. The pilot's voice came over the comm, "Approaching Redstone Air Station. Hold tight." She tightened the straps on her seat harness, eyes fixed on the horizon. Every mission started the same way, new location, new cover, same hollow ache under her ribs. She'd thought she'd get used to it by now, the constant dislocation, the pretending. But the more she moved, the less she felt she belonged anywhere. The landing was rough. The plane bounced once, then steadied. When the ramp lowered, cold wind rushed in, biting her skin. A uniformed officer waited on the tarmac, broad-shouldered, mid-40s, jaw carved from habit. His name tag read Cole. "Lieutenant Monroe." "Yes, sir." "Welcome to Redstone. Hope you like rain." She forced a polite smile. "Rain's fine, sir. Keeps people honest." He gave her a puzzled look but didn't press. "Your orders say Logistics Oversight, Air Operations Division. You'll report to Hangar 4 after check-in. We're short on admin, so expect long hours." "Understood." As he turned away, she glanced around the base, rows of hangars, radar domes, training aircraft gleaming wet under the overcast light. Everything looked disciplined, organized. But beneath that surface hum, she felt it again. Tension like static before a storm. Inside the admin office, a young sergeant processed her arrival. "You came from Norfolk." "Briefly." "Word travels," he said quietly. "You were at the SEAL facility, right? Heard things got messy there." Jade's expression didn't change. "Just paperwork, Sergeant." He grinned awkwardly and went back to typing. "Sure, paperwork." By noon she'd settled into her new quarters, identical to the last. Narrow bed, metal desk, muted walls. She unpacked mechanically, hanging uniforms with precision, aligning boots by tread pattern. Order brought control. Control brought calm. Then she set up her private link, encrypted drive, dual authentication, new ID. Code name this time, Vesper 3. Mission file labeled simply Directive SD-10, Redstone Inquiry. She read the brief twice, lips pressed thin. Objective: assess reported irregularities in aircraft maintenance logs. Determine cause of 2 unexplained training crashes. Evaluate command climate. Operate covertly. Do not engage until confirmation. 2 crashes. 2 families waiting for answers that would never come unless she found them. She powered down the device and leaned back. For a moment her reflection in the dark screen looked like someone else entirely. Older, thinner, eyes haunted by repetition. By 1400 hours she was walking the hangar floor, clipboard in hand, blending in among the technicians. The scent of fuel, oil, and rain mixed in the air. Mechanics shouted over turbines. Metal echoed underfoot. She stopped beside a training jet sleek, scarred by weather. "Maintenance log on this?" she asked. A tech sergeant handed her a tablet. "Last service 3 weeks ago. Routine check, she's clean." "Any anomalies?" "Nothing logged." She scrolled through the data, nodding timestamps. Routine, perfectly routine, too perfect. Not a single variance in hours flown, pressure tested, or oil replaced. Human systems never ran this clean. Either someone was lying or someone had learned to hide the truth better. She handed back the tablet with a nod. "Thanks." He shrugged. "We try to keep her alive." As she walked away, she caught snippets of conversation, pilots joking, voices light but strained. 2 crashes in a month. That's no coincidence. Command says pilot error again. Same flight profile, same weather, same time of day. The same pattern. That evening, she reviewed digital flight logs until her eyes ached. Data lines repeated like echoes, identical numbers, identical signatures. Impossible unless copied. The crash reports blamed environmental conditions, but weather data said otherwise. Someone had overwritten the records. She closed the file, rubbed her temples. The room was dim except for the glow of the laptop. Rain tapped softly on the window. In the silence, a memory returned. Tor's mother outside the courtroom, clutching a folded flag, asking quietly, "Did he suffer?" Jade exhaled. Same ghosts, different names. The next morning, she reported to Hangar 4 under her cover as logistics analyst. Commander Cole was there, along with a small group of senior staff. "Monroe," he said, "you'll coordinate with Maintenance Chief Porter. He's old school, doesn't like outsiders. Don't take it personal." "Understood." Chief Porter looked her up and down. "Admin, don't slow my crew down. We've got enough eyes watching us already." "Eyes make sure people get home alive, Chief." He grunted but said nothing more. By midday, she'd learned the rhythm of the hangar, the cycles of noise, the faces that lingered where they shouldn't, the silences that lasted a little too long. Every base had tells. This one wore its secrets under grease and protocol. At lunch, she ate alone at the corner table, reviewing old maintenance rosters. That's when someone slid a tray across from her. A woman, early 30s, cropped hair, pilot's wings. "Mind if I sit?" Not at all. Captain Rena Valdez, she said, offering a hand. You're the new analyst, right? Jade Monroe. Valdez studied her for a beat. You don't talk like admin. Maybe I read too much field data. The captain smirked. Or maybe you've been in the field. Jade didn't answer. Valdez leaned closer, voice low. Whatever they told you about those crashes, don't believe it. First one was weather. The second, the plane stalled mid-maneuver. Systems froze. I was on tower comms. Black box data vanished from the server an hour later. Jade's eyes met hers. Vanished. Deleted, no trace. Command called it a technical error. Then they warned us not to talk about it. Who gave the order? Valdez hesitated. Commander Cole said it came from higher. There it was, the fracture line. Same script, different stage. Thank you, Jade said quietly. That helps. Valdez tilted her head. Helps what? Jade paused, understanding patterns. Valdez studied her again, recognition flickering. You're not just admin, are you? Jade didn't answer. Silence was safer. That night she walked the flight line after curfew, moonlight glinting off aircraft canopies. The cold bit through her jacket, but she didn't feel it. Her mind replayed Valdez's words. Deleted data, vanished records, chain of command complicit. She stopped beside Hangar 6. A red tag hung loosely from the lock maintenance hold. She shouldn't go in, but orders had never been her true compass. Truth was. Inside, the darkness smelled of oil and ozone. She used a small penlight to sweep the room. Rows of equipment lined the walls. In the center sat a flight simulator, powered off but warm, recently used. She crouched beside it, scanning the console. Someone had bypassed the data port, rerouting it through an external drive now missing. She photographed everything, time-stamped, encrypted. Then she heard it, the faint metallic click of a door latch behind her. Working late, a voice said. She turned slowly. Commander Cole stood in the doorway, face unreadable in the half-light. Sir, she said evenly, just familiarizing myself with the equipment. After hours. I couldn't sleep. He stepped closer. You're thorough, Lieutenant, I'll give you that. Most admin officers don't wander hangars at midnight. Maybe most don't care about flight safety reports. He smiled faintly. You've got nerve, I respect that. But careful, too much curiosity can look like insubordination. I'll keep that in mind, sir. He lingered a second longer, eyes searching hers. Get some rest, Lieutenant. We've lost enough people already. When he left, she waited until the echo of his boots disappeared, then exhaled slowly. Her pulse finally slowed. The trap was starting to smell familiar. Back in her quarters, she uploaded the images, encrypting them under the SD-10 channel. The reply came within minutes. Data received. Maintain cover. Observe command interaction. Suspect higher coordination. She stared at the message for a long time before closing it. The next morning, Cole called a general safety briefing. Pilots, techs, admin, all assembled in Hangar 2. His speech was calm, confident, measured. We're a team, he said. Every loss cuts deep, but speculation kills faster than mistakes. Until official findings are released, I expect silence. Silence, the same word every guilty command used. As the group dispersed, Valdez brushed past Jade, whispering, He's lying. The simulator was used again last night. There's something in those drives. Jade didn't reply, but later she found a note slipped under her door. Meet me by the East Observation Deck, 2200. R. At 10 that night, the deck overlooked the fog-shrouded runway. Valdez stood waiting, hands stuffed in her jacket. I found something, she said, voice trembling. Old maintenance records from 6 months back. A tech flagged irregular hydraulic readings. He reported it. 2 days later, he was reassigned to Alaska, quietly. What's his name? Matthews. I tried contacting him, no response. Jade felt that familiar chill crawl up her spine. You kept copies. Valdez nodded, pulling a flash drive from her pocket. I don't know who to trust, but you look like someone who doesn't scare easy. Jade accepted the drive, her expression unreadable. I'll take a look. Valdez hesitated. Whatever this is, it's bigger than Redstone, isn't it? Jade met her eyes. It usually is. The wind howled across the deck, scattering rain into mist. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Valdez whispered, You've done this before. Jade didn't deny it, too many times. Valdez nodded slowly. Then promise me one thing, whatever you find, don't let them bury it. Jade's voice was soft, almost tender. They can bury truth, but they can't kill it. As Valdez walked away, Jade looked out across the runway lights, glimmering, endless, fragile. Somewhere out there in all that darkness, another system was already cracking. And she'd be the one sent to listen when it broke. Why did truth always come wrapped in danger? Jade stared at the flash drive on her desk, the tiny metal rectangle glinting under lamplight. It looked harmless. It was. Every time someone handed her one of these, it carried ghosts, people who trusted her with something that could destroy them. The rain hadn't stopped since midnight. It tapped against the window like a metronome, a steady rhythm to the thoughts she couldn't quiet. She inserted the drive into her laptop, bypassed encryption, and opened the folder labeled Maintenance Logs, Hydraulic ALERTS. The first file was simple, numbers, signatures, dates, but halfway down the data twisted, values overwritten, names blacked out, timestamps reset. Someone had scrubbed the evidence but left the residue of their edits. She knew that mistake well. Amateurs deleted, professionals rewrote. Whoever did this was no amateur. A second file contained a report from Technician D. Matthews. He'd logged a pressure anomaly in Jet 214, just days before the crash. The signature of the reviewing officer was missing. The remarks section had been replaced with a single line, resolved. Resolved how? By deleting the man who filed it. Jade leaned back, exhaling slowly. Her instincts were rarely wrong. The same patterns she'd seen at the SEAL base were alive here. Tight command circles, falsified logs, officers more concerned with optics than truth. But this time something else hid beneath the surface, something she couldn't yet name. Her burner phone buzzed once, a message from SD-10 Command. Progress update required. Confirm presence of coordinated cover-up. Maintain embedded status. Observe key personnel. Commander Cole, Chief Porter, Capt. Valdez, potential ally. Avoid exposure. She stared at Valdez's name, a pang tightening in her chest. Potential ally. That phrase always felt like a curse. Every mission had one, someone who reached out, who trusted her without knowing why, and who often didn't make it to the end. She turned off the screen, shoved the phone away. By morning, the storm had thinned to mist. The base looked washed clean but smelled of rust and fuel. She walked into Hangar 4 early, coffee in hand, finding Chief Porter already at work. He looked up, eyes narrow. You don't take days off, do you? I prefer progress reports to vacations, she said. He snorted. Careful, people like you make the rest of us look bad. People like me. Quiet, efficient, makes officers nervous. She smiled faintly. Maybe they should be. He grunted and went back to work, muttering about bureaucracy. But Jade noticed the slight tremor in his hands as he logged into the system. The same man who barked orders like a drill sergeant was now hesitant, checking his shoulder before every keystroke. At 1100 hours, Cole called an impromptu staff briefing. Everyone filed into the operations room, mechanics, flight officers, admin. He stood at the front, voice smooth and authoritative. We've been advised, he began, that external reviewers will be visiting Redstone next week to conduct a safety audit. Nothing to worry about, routine procedure. I expect full cooperation. Jade's pulse slowed. External reviewers, not routine. That was SD-10's next phase, covert oversight disguised as an audit. It meant her data had reached command. But Cole's expression betrayed something else, a flicker of unease. Until then, he added, no unauthorized personnel near the maintenance bay. I'll remind everyone that base access logs are monitored. The room nodded obediently. Only Valdez glanced toward Jade, silent understanding flickering between them. After the briefing, Valdez caught up with her near the coffee station. You see the look in his eyes, she whispered. That wasn't confidence, that was fear. Fear means he knows what's coming, Jade murmured. Valdez leaned closer. I think he's deleting files. Night shifts closed access. Porter's been locking doors after hours. Can you confirm? Not yet, but I can get into the tower systems. I have a clearance code he doesn't know I kept. Don't, Jade warned softly. If you access those servers, he'll know. He's monitoring activity. Valdez smirked faintly. Then I'll be careful. Jade caught her wrist. Careful isn't enough. Their eyes locked, one full of reckless conviction, the other of quiet warning. For a moment, Jade saw her younger self reflected back. Idealistic, fearless, not yet hollowed by loss. Valdez pulled away gently. We can't keep pretending. If they're covering up maintenance tampering, more people will die. You know that. I know, Jade whispered. But there's a way to reveal truth without painting a target on your back. Valdez shook her head. Some truths don't wait for permission. And then she was gone, her boots echoing down the corridor. That night Jade couldn't sleep. She lay awake listening to the low hum of aircraft engines, counting the seconds between takeoff and silence. At 200 her laptop chimed. An encrypted folder appeared in her inbox, unsigned, untraceable. She hesitated before opening it. Inside was a single video file, cam log H6214 MOV. She pressed play. Grainy security footage filled the screen. A hangar, shadows moving, Commander Cole entering followed by Chief Porter. They approached Jet 214. Porter opened an access panel, pulled a small module from the engine control unit and replaced it with another. Cole watched, expression cold. Audio crackled faintly. Cole, no paper trail. When they asked, it was a calibration fix. Porter and the pilot. Cole, he shouldn't have been flying that day. The report will say so. The screen froze. Jade's breath caught. She leaned forward, rewound, watched again. Porter's hands were trembling. Cole's weren't. This was it, proof. She checked metadata, timestamped 2 nights before the second crash. Whoever sent it had risked everything. She encrypted the file, sent a coded burst to SD-10, confirmation OBTAINED. TARGETS, Cole Porter, secure immediate audit, potential leak, source unknown. Then she sat back, staring at the rain-streaked glass. Who had sent the footage? There was only one possibility. Valdez. Morning came gray and silent. When Jade reached the hangar, something felt wrong. The noise was gone, no chatter, no engines, no laughter. People stood in small clusters, whispering. Garrett's counterpart here, a gruff flight sergeant, approached her quietly. You heard. Heard what? Captain Valdez. Plane went down during a solo check flight this morning. Jet 241. They're saying mechanical failure. Jade's heart stuttered. When? 400 hours. They found debris 10 miles east. No survivors. She stood very still. The world tilted slightly, the edges of sound dulling. Rain pattered faintly outside, too soft for the weight of what she felt. She nodded once, thank you. Then she walked away, each step slow, deliberate, like her body moved but her mind stayed behind. In her quarters, she locked the door and sank onto the bed, staring at her hands. They didn't shake, not yet. They never did, not until much later when the job was done and the silence came back. She opened her encrypted log, typed mechanically. Subject VALDAZ CAPT. Deceased. Probable foul play. Recommend immediate containment of Redstone Command. But words didn't feel like enough. She closed the laptop and pressed her palms to her face. For the first time in a long time, the mask cracked. Valdez had trusted her, handed her evidence, believed her warnings, and now she was gone. Jade's voice broke the silence, barely a whisper. You were right, some truths don't wait. The next 24 hours blurred into noise. Search teams combing crash sites, Cole issuing statements, journalists sniffing near the perimeter. But behind the chaos, Jade worked quietly, methodically, feeding the system she served. When the audit team arrived, plain suits, guarded expressions, she briefed them in coded language. The footage, the tampered components, the altered logs, each detail stacked like ammunition. By evening, Cole was summoned to Command HQ for immediate review. He didn't return. Chief Porter was placed on leave pending inquiry. The cover-up had collapsed, but victory felt hollow. At dusk, Jade walked out to the airfield. The wreckage of Jet 241 had been cleared, but the burn marks still stained the tarmac dark, uneven, permanent. She knelt, fingertips brushing the edge of the scorched concrete. Sorry, she murmured. You shouldn't have had to prove it this way. Wind whipped across the field, cold and restless. Her phone buzzed once more. Message from SD-10. Directive fulfilled, extraction authorized, new orders pending. She stared at the screen. For the first time, she didn't feel relief, only exhaustion. Back in her quarters, she began packing her single duffel again. Same motions, same ritual. But her reflection in the window stopped her. She looked older now, not in years but in spirit. The serpent tattoo caught the dim light, black and silver, alive and cruelly beautiful. She whispered to it, as she always did when no one was listening. How many more? There was no answer, only the hum of distant aircraft. When the transport came at dawn, she stood alone on the tarmac, wind tearing at her hair. Commander Cole's office lights were dark now, his nameplate gone. Justice, in its quiet, bureaucratic way, had been served. She boarded the plane without looking back. At altitude, she unfolded the mission debrief file. Final line read, source compromised, operative status reassigned, secondary contact deceased in action, proceed to next evaluation site, maintain silence. She read it twice, then closed the folder. Her voice, barely audible, carried into the hum of the engines. You can't keep burying the dead with paperwork. Outside, dawn broke in thin streaks of gold. The horizon looked endless again, cold, unreachable. And somewhere between grief and duty, Jade Monroe reminded herself why she kept going. Not for medals, not for redemption, but for the few who still believed the truth was worth dying for. She touched the tattoo on her wrist, felt the raised lines of ink beneath her fingers, and whispered into the wind. Sometimes the only way to serve the living is to speak for the lost. Why did justice always demand a sacrifice? The debrief room was small and windowless, gray walls, no clock, 2 chairs, and a table scarred with years of forgotten confessions. The kind of room built not for truth, but for control. Jade sat in one of the chairs, spine straight, hands folded on the table. Across from her, 2 men and 1 woman in civilian suits stared back. Their badges read Office of Special Oversight, SD-10 Command Liaison. But she knew what they really were, internal review officers. The people who cleaned up the messes. The woman spoke first, voice clipped but calm. Lieutenant Monroe, do you understand the purpose of this review? Yes, ma'am. State it for the record. To evaluate my operational conduct at Redstone Air Station and determine whether the actions I took contributed to the outcome of Directive SD-10. Specifically, the woman added, the incident involving Captain Rena Valdez. Jade's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Yes, ma'am. The man on the right flipped through her file. According to your report, you warned Captain Valdez not to engage with restricted data, yet she accessed it anyway. She was attempting to expose a pattern of falsified maintenance reports. And you didn't intervene. I advised against it. But you didn't stop her. She wasn't under my command. The man closed the file, exhaling sharply. You were the only operative with full knowledge of the investigation. She trusted you, and now she's dead. The words landed like shrapnel. Jade didn't flinch, but her eyes lowered for the first time. The woman leaned forward. Do you feel responsible for her death, Lieutenant? Jade's silence stretched long enough that even the hum of the fluorescent light seemed to pause. Finally, she said, responsibility isn't the right word. What is? Consequence. The woman's pen froze midair. Explain. Jade's voice was steady but hollow. Every mission has a cost. You calculate risk, you manage variables, but you can't control people's choices. Valdez made hers. She believed exposing truth was worth dying for. I believed I could protect her by waiting for timing. We were both wrong. The room stayed still for a long moment. Then the man on the left, older, gray hair cropped tight, spoke quietly. You've been doing this a long time, Monroe. Since SD9. How many times has it ended like this? She looked at him, eyes weary. Enough. And yet you keep accepting assignments. Because the work doesn't end. Or because you don't know how to stop. The question hung between them like a mirror she didn't want to look into. I stop when the truth stops needing me, she said. The gray-haired man sighed, closing his notebook. That's the problem, it never does. They dismissed her after 2 hours. No reprimand, no praise, just another formality buried in a file that would vanish into an encrypted archive. Outside, the corridor smelled of recycled air and disinfectant. She walked past rows of identical doors, each hiding its own secrets. When she reached the elevator, her reflection caught in the brushed metal doors, uniform neat, eyes tired, face expressionless. She didn't recognize the woman looking back. Back in her temporary quarters at Norfolk, she found a small envelope on her bunk. No markings, just her name printed neatly in black. Inside was a single folded note. Her name will be cleared. The official report will list mechanical failure, not error. You did your job. Rest while you can. No signature, but she knew the handwriting. Hartley, the Inspector General from Norfolk, the one who'd relieved Dalton. Jade read the note twice, then placed it carefully in her duffel beside her insignia. Rest while you can. They always said that, as if rest were a thing she could choose. That night she didn't sleep. She walked instead, down to the edge of the docks where the ocean whispered against concrete. The city lights bled into the water, bending and breaking with the tide. She thought of Valdez, her sharp grin, her fearless voice, the way she'd said some truths don't wait. Jade whispered it now to the sea. No, they don't. She stayed there until dawn, letting the cold wind strip away everything soft inside her. When she returned, a message awaited on her encrypted terminal. Directive SD-11 pending. Pre-brief scheduled 1300 hours. No rest then. At 1300 she was in a conference room lined with screens. Hartley was there, as composed as ever, hands folded neatly. Lieutenant Monroe, she began, your actions at Redstone were reviewed. Command concurs with your findings. The integrity of your cover held under pressure. Your next assignment is under consideration. Jade nodded, understood. Hartley studied her for a moment, her usually stoic face softening slightly. You've lost more than most operatives under this program. You don't have to keep accepting these missions. It's what I'm trained for. No, Hartley said quietly. It's what you've become used to. Jade looked away. There's a difference. Not as much as you think. Hartley sighed, leaning back. I started this job 20 years ago. I believed oversight could save lives. I still do. But every time someone like Valdez dies, I ask myself if truth is worth the bodies it leaves behind. Jade's voice was barely above a whisper. It has to be, otherwise none of this matters. Hartley nodded slowly. Then I suppose that's why they keep sending you. Later that afternoon, Jade sat alone in the base chapel. It was empty except for a single candle flickering beneath a stained glass window. She hadn't prayed in years, but something about the silence drew her there. She traced the small metal tag she wore beneath her uniform, one of the few personal things she still kept. It wasn't her own. It belonged to someone she'd lost during SD9. The tag was scratched, the name half faded. She couldn't even remember his face clearly anymore, just the sound of his laugh before the mission went bad. She closed her eyes. In the dark, she saw Valdez's face, then Dalton, then all the others, people she'd exposed, people she'd lost, people she'd saved. They blended together until there was no difference between guilt and purpose. When she opened her eyes again, she whispered, "If I stop, who takes my place?" The candle flickered once, then steadied. She left before anyone could see her. 2 days later, she was cleared for reassignment. Her new orders came in a sealed folder marked Confidential, Domestic Internal Security Oversight. Location undisclosed, duration indefinite. Hartley met her at the hangar before departure. "You're sure?" she asked quietly. "After Redstone, after Valdez." "I'm sure." Hartley exhaled. "One day this program will end. You know that, right? Every secret unit does." "Maybe," Jade said, "but not before it finishes what it started." Hartley handed her a small envelope. "From Valdez's personal effects. Thought you should have it." Jade took it, hesitating. "What is it?" "Open it when you're ready." On the flight she did. Inside was a folded photograph, grainy, creased. It showed Valdez and a group of pilots laughing beside a training jet, arms slung over each other's shoulders. On the back, a note in Valdez's handwriting. "For the days when the silence feels heavier than the mission, you're not alone." Jade stared at it for a long time. The engines droned softly beneath her, and for the first time in years, her throat tightened. She slipped the photo into her jacket pocket over her heart. When the plane touched down at her next destination, an unnamed facility buried somewhere in the Rockies, she stepped out into thin, cold air. Snow glittered on the peaks, blindingly white against steel sky. A new co greeted her, polite, detached. "Lieutenant Monroe, welcome to Fort Helena. Your quarters are prepped. We run a tight schedule here, no room for delay." She nodded, wouldn't have it any other way. As he walked ahead, she glanced around. Men and women moved with mechanical precision, their faces unreadable. The same rhythm, the same culture. Another system that thought itself unbreakable. She followed the co through the snow, the serpent tattoo hidden beneath her sleeve, the photo warm against her chest. Behind her, the plane's engines faded into the wind. Ahead, the mountains loomed like silent sentinels. The cycle was beginning again. She didn't smile, didn't sigh, just kept walking, steady, focused, unshaken, because she already knew how it would end. Not with applause, not with medals, but with silence. The kind that doesn't forget. Why did ghosts never stay buried? Snow whispered against the windows of Fort Helena as if the mountains themselves were breathing. The air inside the base felt colder than the wind outside, sterile, too still, the kind of stillness that made even confident men lower their voices. Jade Monroe walked through the corridors without a sound, the echo of her boots swallowed by the concrete floor. 2 weeks had passed since she arrived, and already she could sense it, the rhythm of fear hiding under discipline. This place wasn't about training. It was about secrecy. Her cover this time was Security Compliance Officer. An easy role, paperwork, oversight, signatures no one ever read. But her real mission was buried deep within SD11's briefing. Objective: Evaluate covert experimental programs operating under Serpent Directive Legacy Authorization. Identify and neutralize unauthorized continuations. Legacy Authorization. The words made her chest tighten. It meant Serpent Directive hadn't died, it had mutated. The deeper she looked, the more she recognized the fingerprints. Same file structures, same encryption patterns. Someone had rebuilt the ghost she once served under a new name. Each night she dug quietly, decrypting old logs while the wind screamed through the mountain passes. The data told fragments of a story: unregistered test flights, biometric trials, behavioral assessments labeled operator resilience metrics. On paper, it looked like performance tracking. In truth, it was something darker: experiments on psychological conditioning using live operatives. They were trying to engineer obedience. And the program bore an old signature she hadn't seen in years. Commander R. Dalton. Her blood ran cold. He wasn't in prison after all. The inquiry must have ended in negotiation, leverage, silence. The kind of silence only high-ranking power could buy. Now he was here. She first saw him 3 days later at the upper-level briefing. Same squared shoulders, same smile, smaller now, thinner, like something eaten from the inside. His hair was grayer, but his voice hadn't lost its edge. "Some of you may know me," he said to the gathered officers. "I've been brought on as a consultant for behavioral optimization. The goal is simple: reduce hesitation, increase mission efficiency." Hesitation, that was his new word for conscience. Jade kept her expression blank, her gaze down on her notes. He didn't seem to recognize her, or maybe he did and wanted her to think he didn't. Afterward, she walked the perimeter alone, snow crunching under her boots. The wind cut through her coat, but her mind was colder. Dalton's presence meant one thing: someone high above had decided that Serpent Directive hadn't failed. It had been too effective to kill. She returned to her quarters and opened her encrypted line. Message draft. Target Dalton reemerged under SD-11. Evidence gathering in progress. Authorization request for direct exposure. The reply came 5 hours later. Denied. Observe only. Await confirmation. They were afraid. Even her handlers didn't want to touch this. Days blurred into the kind of monotony that eats at the soul. Paperwork, reports, drills, all while hidden cameras documented everything. The operatives here weren't recruits, they were test subjects. Sleep cycles measured, stress monitored, emotions recorded. Every reaction fed into an algorithm. She watched one evaluation through one-way glass. A young Marine strapped to biometric sensors, asked to simulate combat scenarios under psychological manipulation. When he failed, the instructor shouted until his hands shook. Dalton observed from the corner, silent, expression clinical. Afterward, Jade intercepted the performance logs. The Marine's failure score was flagged for conditioning. The next day, he was reassigned to isolation. She remembered that pattern. She remembered what it did to people. That night, she confronted Dalton. He was alone in the control room, reviewing data streams. "Commander," she said quietly. He looked up, mild surprise flickering across his face. "Lieutenant Monroe, I wondered when you'd find your way here." "So you remember me." He smiled faintly. "Hard to forget the woman who ended my command." "You ended it yourself," she said. "Semantics," he replied. "And yet here we both are still serving the same ghost." "This isn't service, it's corruption." He rose from the console, walking toward her with that same slow, predatory calm. "Corruption built this country, Lieutenant. Without it, nothing gets done. You of all people should understand, Serpent Directive wasn't about morality. It was about results. Results that killed good people." He shrugged, "and saved thousands more. History forgets the ratios." She held his gaze. "What are you doing here, Dalton?" "Continuing the work," he said simply. "You dismantled one base, I built 3. Her stomach turned. You're experimenting on soldiers. I'm freeing them from hesitation. No, she said softly. You're removing their humanity. He leaned close enough for her to see the red veins in his eyes. Humanity is inefficient. For a long moment neither moved. Then he straightened, smile returning. Be careful, Lieutenant. Oversight agents tend to disappear up here. Avalanches happen all the time. She didn't reply. She just walked out, pulse hammering, rage coiling tight in her chest. That night she broke every protocol. She copied the behavioral experiment files onto a secure drive, attached evidence of biometric manipulation, and embedded footage of Dalton sessions. She drafted an emergency transmission to SD-11 Command, proof that Serpent Directive had resurrected itself under a new flag. But before she could send it, an alert flashed across her screen. System breach detected. Authorization revoked. Her access vanished in real time. Someone was inside her terminal. Then the power cut. The room plunged into darkness, red emergency lights flickering to life. She grabbed her coat, the drive, her sidearm, and slipped into the corridor. Sirens wailed faintly somewhere below, containment protocols. Dalton had moved faster than she thought. She ducked into the maintenance wing, heart pounding, footsteps muffled by snow tracked in from the storm. Voices echoed faintly, security teams sweeping the halls. Lieutenant Monroe, step out with your hands visible. She ignored the command and kept moving. If she could reach the comm tower, she could broadcast the evidence manually. She made it halfway across the upper catwalk when Dalton appeared at the far end, pistol drawn. His voice echoed, low and almost gentle. You never learn, do you? She stopped. You built a machine that eats people and call it progress. And you keep breaking machines that save them. He stepped closer, gun leveled. Give me the drive, you'll walk away alive, no one has to know. She looked down at the swirling snow far below, then back at him. You'll just start again somewhere else. He smirked, probably. She exhaled slowly. Then you know I can't let that happen. He took another step and froze. A distant alarm blared, louder now. Then a voice over the intercom. Containment breach in Sector C, evacuate immediately. Dalton's eyes flicked away for half a second. It was enough. Jade fired once. The bullet struck the catwalk railing beside him, shattering metal and throwing sparks. He stumbled back, lost footing, grabbed the rail, but his hand slipped. For a moment time slowed. He fell into the void below, disappearing into a storm of snow and silence. Jade stood still, chest heaving, smoke curling from her weapon. When the sirens faded, she walked down the stairwell to where he'd fallen. There was nothing, just a twisted railing and the endless white outside. No body. Only the wind. By dawn, SD-11 recovery teams arrived under emergency orders. They secured the base, seized every file, evacuated personnel. The official report would later read, system malfunction caused facility lockdown. No casualties confirmed. But Jade knew better. As she watched the convoy depart, Hartley stepped beside her, face pale in the mountain light. You did what you had to, Hartley said quietly. Did I? Hartley nodded toward the horizon. Dalton's gone, the project's over, that's what matters. Jade didn't answer. Her eyes followed the swirling snow where he'd vanished. She knew men like him didn't die that easily. Ghosts never did. When she finally boarded the transport back to D.C., the base was already being erased from the map, its files reclassified, its name deleted. On the flight, she opened her duffel. Inside, the drive still waited. She hadn't given it to anyone yet. Maybe she never would. Some truths were too heavy for the system to carry. She reached into her pocket and unfolded Valdez's photograph. The ink was smudged from wear, the faces faded but still smiling. For the first time in months, Jade allowed herself a breath that didn't hurt. Hartley's words echoed faintly in her mind. One day this program will end. Maybe it would, maybe it wouldn't, but until then, someone had to stand between the silence and the ones it devoured. She looked out the window. The sun broke through the storm clouds, scattering light across the snow-capped peaks. For a moment, the world looked almost clean again. She touched the serpent tattoo beneath her sleeve. The scales caught the sunlight, alive with quiet defiance. Maybe one day, she whispered, someone else won't have to do this. Her reflection in the glass met her gaze, tired, unbroken, and utterly alone. The engines roared, lifting her back into the sky, toward another horizon that would demand her again. Because some battles never make headlines. Some heroes never come home. And sometimes, the loudest victories are the ones fought in silence.